Okay, so as we gather on this day, I acknowledge that I'm currently on the traditional territory of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe people. For countless generations, they have lived, worked, and cared for this land that we now inhabit. We pay tribute to their ancestors whose knowledge, traditions, and resilience have shaped the fabric of this place. We also recognize the enduring presence and contributions of other Indigenous people, including the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat nations, who have nurtured this land. Acknowledging the painful history of colonization, displacement, and culture ensure we commit ourselves to ongoing process of reconciliation. It is our collective responsibility to learn, listen, and engage with Indigenous communities, honoring their rights, perspectives, and aspirations. As we stand on this ground, let us reflect on the interconnectedness of all living beings and our shared duty to protect and preserve the natural world. May we walk forward together in a spirit of respect, co- cooperation, and healing, guided by the principle of truth, justice, and reconciliation. Miigwech.
Thank you,
Over to
Aditya.
Sabrina.
Thank you, Aditya, for opening us up with a beautiful land acknowledgement. Hi, everyone. I am Sabrina Ashknab, and thank you for joining us. I am the Education Programs Assistant at the Gord Downey and Cheney Wenjack Fund. So, inspired by Cheney's story and Gord's call to build a better Canada, the Gord Downey and Cheney Wenjack Fund aims to build cultural understanding and create a path towards reconciliation between Indigenous and non Indigenous peoples. So it's great to be here live for this special DWF session with Jaime Black. So, did you know that just by joining us, you are taking a part? You're taking part in a reconciliation. A reconciliation is a meaningful step that moves reconciliation forward. So, anytime you're learning about Canada's true history, the experience of Indigenous peoples, or learning about the great things Indigenous peoples have contributed to this country, or building relationships with Indigenous peoples, those are all reconciliations. So, thank you for taking part in a reconciliation today. We have received a number of questions from our audience across Turtle Island. If you have any further questions or comments for Jaime, please put them in the chat on Facebook or on YouTube. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Jaime Black. Jaime is a multidisciplinary artist of mixed Anishinaabe and Finnish descent. Her art practice engages in themes of memory, identity, place, and resistance, and is grounded in an understanding of the body and the land as sources of cultural and spiritual knowledge. Through her art practice, Jaime creates space and time to connect with and enter into a relationship with the land in which she works. Her land art practice begins with spending time out on the land and connecting to the stories, knowledge, and the history the land carries, paying respect and attention to the lessons the land has to teach. Jaime then weaves these teachings with her own experiences and insights, creating images and impressions from that space of connection. Today, we will hear more about Jaime's art practices with a particular focus on her internationally recognized REDress Project. So, welcome, Jaime. Oh, I believe you have to unmute. There we go.
Sorry. Bonjour. Hello, my name's Jaime Black. Thanks for the great intro, Sabrina. It's really great to be here. I'm excited to surprise and share my story. So I'm coming from the Red River Valley right now, and I have ancestors that have walked on this land. So it's here in the heart of Turtle Island. And speaking of land acknowledgements, I always like to say that too, especially when we're doing events online and nobody knows where anyone's coming from. It really means a lot to me to be working on the land where my ancestors walked, and that really informs my art practice. And I think has given me kind of the land has really been like a strength to me in doing the work that I do. So I guess I know you guys, everybody wants to know about the REDress Project, and it's become such a massive community movement over the last 10 years. I actually started the REDress Project by putting up a few red dresses in 2009, I think it was. So that was the first iteration of the REDress Project as an installation art project. So I came up with this idea for the empty red dress as a symbol for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and the violence that Indigenous women are facing all across Turtle Island. I felt like I saw and was kind of part of and on the outskirts of community movements around land, around protecting the land, around protecting community, around kind of revitalizing culture, all of that stuff. I was, kind of in these groups and seeing these movements happen. And part of all those movements were families, individual families working with community, looking for their loved ones who had gone missing or been murdered. So really what was happening is on the ground, families were trying to do this work with very little support from larger institutions. They didn't have a lot of money. They were, families were literally making photocopies and hardly could afford making photocopies to make missing posters for their loved ones. And having spent like a few years kind of around these circles and learning about everything that was going on really made me think about how we can support these families, how myself as an artist, how can I support the families? And so I think that was one of the, kind of defining moments that led to the idea of the REDress Project. The REDress Project is really just an installation art project of empty red dresses put in public spaces as a reminder and a symbol of all the women and girls that we've lost. So I thought of this project, and I thought of how people are always forgetting about the effects and the violence of colonialism that is ongoing for women and their families. So I thought about like, how can I create something that allows people to continue to remember and have this in our face, that every day we're walking around and we see a red dress after red dress after red dress, then we can no longer as a society ignore this problem and ignore the violence that families are experiencing. And so I just went ahead and I kind of went and got a few dresses from a thrift store. And, I kind of took care of those dresses and made a connection with those dresses and brought them outside. And, like before I even started all of this, this is what I did. And I put them up in the trees by the river, by the Red River. And, I watched the wind like start to move them, and they all started to move together in a dance almost. And it was super, super powerful. Like every time I'm beside those dresses, I get goosebumps and I get chills. And I really think that red dress can pull the energy of our ancestors into it, can pull the energy of the women we've lost into those dresses and animate them. And those dresses are standing beside us as we as a community fight together for justice for Indigenous women and girls. I think that's really important. Over the years of doing this work, it becomes very heavy to carry all the stories, all the violence, everything that the community has been carrying. To carry that is very heavy. And so I think it's really important that we understand that these dresses are not only a symbol of absence, but also they are a presence. They're reclaiming space. They're reclaiming space all across Turtle Island, and they're standing and they're fighting for justice with us as a community. And so I think of those dresses today when we have installations of red dresses, or you see a red dress, or there's red dresses at a march for MMIWG. These dresses are standing with us. They're warriors and they're fighting together with us for a just space for Indigenous women and girls. Over the years, I've seen dresses in so many different iterations. So I think about 7 years into doing the REDress Project and doing installation after installation after installation in different places, I started to think about, how can I allow this work to grow beyond myself? And so what I did was I put out a call for community and the public to participate in the REDress Project by putting up a red dress in front of their home, in front of their business, by creating their own installations of red dresses, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous community. I invited anyone and everyone to really start participating in this movement. And wow, like the amount of things people have done. And I'm sure you guys have seen, some of the iterations of the REDress Project in your own communities, far and wide, all across Turtle Island. People have put up red dresses in parks, in huge spaces, in front of government buildings. I've seen a red dress put in the place of a toppled colonial statue. I've seen red dresses blocking mining access road into traditional territory. So those dresses really are reclaiming and standing and holding ground and taking up space in a way that is extremely powerful and has really become a community. Like, really, the community movement existed already, but it's really bolstered the community movement and pulled a lot more people into that community movement and given it a strength and a power through that symbol of the red dress. So I encourage all of you listening. I think something that, just anyone could do is to put up a red dress in their home or at their home, in their yard, in their business, in the window, different places like that. There are red dress pins that community members have made that are being sold, that you can find places. And really kind of going, I think, like other ways that you could participate in action would be to like find out what community events are happening around your area. There's May 5th. There's a few different days that they've kind of officially said were, kind of specific to drawing attention to MMIWG. And by that, I mean missing, murdered Indigenous women and girls. So there's a few official days, but also, this really is an issue that we're all facing all of the time. It's not just a one-day issue. So I think that, putting up a red dress, if that's something you feel drawn to do, you could do that anytime. It doesn't have to be on the official day. But there's also, there's always a movement happening in the community. There's community organizations that are doing work around MMIWG all of the time. There's marches and things like that. May 5th is one of the days that to commemorate Indigenous women and girls. And, during that time, you can kind of approach these organizations, go to a march in your area, go see what kind of events are being held, participate in those events, make connections with people. And, I really encourage anyone to do that work and to make those connections, because that's the first step in taking action around creating change. And so really letting the families lead and joining the movement and providing support and allyship is so very important. Sometimes that's as simple as, if there's a sacred fire, like right now, for example, there's 2 camps that are set up by community here in Winnipeg. And the camps are for to search the landfill for missing 4 women who have been murdered in our city. So for the last 2 years, families have started sacred fires to honor the women who have been murdered, and also to call for action around searching for their remains. So these sacred fires have been burning for over a year, or maybe even 2 years now, as we have been lobbying the government to help fund a search for the remains of these women. So this is the fight on the ground at the community level right now that's happening here in Winnipeg. And I think about Winnipeg as like the heart of Turtle Island. And I think that this is, I've heard someone call this ground zero for MMIWG. This city is rampant with racism and violence, and we see examples of it day after day after day. But what I also see here, as I see these atrocities happening, is I see how very strong our community is, and how when these things happen to families, we gather together to support the families. And as a community, we helped, people have helped keep the sacred fires going. And I bring all this up because these are the sorts of movements that I think that could use allies and use allyship. Those camps are running 24/7. They have a sacred fire going. I don't know if you can just kind of like imagine the idea of keeping a sacred fire, is the fire needs to never go out. So if you can imagine keeping a fire for a year or longer, that's what's been happening here. So the people at these camps that are tending the fire and keeping the sacred fires, the community that visit the camp, they need tents, they need water, they need wood for the sacred fire, just really basic stuff. And I think really to promote allyship is to just kind of look into and get connected to these kinds of movements that are happening for justice for Indigenous women and girls, and supporting those movements in any way that you can. Because I think a lot of people are wondering like what even they can do, right? Because it is a really pervasive and massive and systemic issues that we're dealing with here that came from settler colonialism, that came from patriarchy, all these different systems that are working together to really create unsafe space for Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. And I apologize for not mentioning Two-Spirit until this time. Two-Spirit people held an extremely important role in traditional Indigenous communities. That was the balancing of both masculine and feminine attributes. And they were quite often understood as spiritual leaders in their communities. And so I don't in any way feel like mean to exclude. But yeah, I think that's a lot of what I wanted to say. But I also just want to add in like one more thing. And what I'm thinking about is, a lot of people will ask me, how did this happen? Where is this violence coming from? Why are Indigenous women at such high risk of violence? And quite a long time ago, when I started doing the REDress Project, I was privileged to hear in Kamloops a speaker, a community advocate and speaker, Jessica Yee. And she's Indigenous, and she's from that area out in BC. And during her presentation, she spoke about when the settlers came over here to Turtle Island and they encountered the Indigenous communities, there was a fundamental kind of clashing of values, because in Indigenous communities, many times were matriarchies. And so they are very much led by women. And she also mentioned that led by women and Two-Spirit people. And I remember that story ever since she told it, because she really explained how women and Two-Spirit people are targeted because of their power. So because those people and those, because we held that kind of power in traditional community, it was in direct opposition to settler colonialism. Settler colonialism was based on patriarchy, and the land-based culture and matriarchy from Europe had been eradicated long ago. And so I think that those clashing systems really created a very violent relationship and an erasure of Indigenous women and Two-Spirit voices in our history. But we, our power to stand up is immense. And something I gained from this movement is really the energy and the power and the strong, strong voices of the women that I have worked with around this, all across Turtle Island over the years. And I see women standing toe to toe and, really being the fire starters for community movements, for grassroots movements all across Turtle Island to protect the land, to protect each other, to protect culture. And being part of that movement is so, so powerful. And I really do think Jessica was, had a point there that, Indigenous women are a formidable opponent to settler colonialism. And it's that's fought against, and that's, actively trying to be suppressed. But it's because of our power that we're targeted to be silenced. But we're not stopping anytime soon. So I'll end that there. I think that was around 20 minutes, hopefully.
Yes, no, that was perfect, Jamie. Thank you. All of your words, your heavy words, can be heavy, as you said. I was driving down past a school here in Thunder Bay, because I'm currently in Thunder Bay, and
I have family there.
Yeah, I have family in Winnipeg. Yeah, I think kind of like as Thunder Bay and Winnipeg also are just like very similar in the way that like there is all of this violence against Indigenous people, and it is heavy to be in these communities. But yeah, I was driving down past the school, and they had red dresses, and it kind of put me in like a choke, because I was like all choked up, because there's like a baby mini red dress, like a toddler, and I was just like thinking, and I was like really reflecting, because obviously like May 5th can be very hard, and there is actually a question from the audience that we'll go into right now, but I do have some other questions. But have you ever had moments of doubt where you thought, this question is from Sophie R. in Guelph, but have you ever had moments of doubt where you thought to yourself, like, I can't do this? If so, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I have. I had actually, when I started doing this work, like for the first like 4 or 5 years, I just like pushed myself to do it because I knew it was really important, and I really put like the work before my own sort of mental health, actually. And so, because I felt like, like it's okay if I'm not like amazing. That's not the point. Like the point is like we need to help the people, right? Like, but after like about 5 years, like it would take me like 2 weeks to get like okay after doing a show. Like it would take me 2 full weeks to get like back to being like sort of all right for a minute. And that was really tough. Like, yeah, it was really tough. And at a certain point I was kind of like, okay, like maybe I was actually like I got really sick. I was like doing a show in Toronto with Red Dresses, and I got really sick, and I just like was like kind of felt like I got to a breaking point. And then and I thought maybe I should stop doing the work. Like I thought, well, maybe this isn't good. Like it's just hurting everybody. It's like reopening wounds. It's like hurting, like we're leaving feeling like, oh my gosh, we're just victims. Like, and because I felt that energy of everybody leaving being like, oh, like my heart is broken.
Yeah.
but I like what happened then is I didn't stop doing the work. That's not what happened. It's like I think that's like for one when I started sharing the work out, so like allowing others to do it. It's okay. And but also like really kind of changing my perspective. So like I just turned my perspective from only speaking about like the violence and the hard things we're all facing, but really looking at everyone who was like gathered in that room and be like, look at us all here standing up together. Look at us all speaking out where we felt like we couldn't. Like, look at us making change in the different ways we're making change. Like, look at how these dresses are making change. Like this, you know, and really looking at it from that perspective and like us, like, you know, I was thinking of those dresses as like being like spiritual warriors, like I said, and like, you know, standing beside us while we do this work. And like, it's heartbreaking. Yeah. But it's also extremely powerful. And like, you know, to stand beside those dresses and like fight for justice, you know?
Yeah. It's incredibly, like, obviously hard and heavy to experience this installation and this project, but it's also very healing for families. And it's also just like that voice and just knowing, and especially like the thought behind it, it's incredible and can be very healing. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I I was wondering what so I had a question and then I lost it.
Okay. That's okay. It's like it gets emotional. It's like hard to remember stuff sometimes.
Yeah, I'm like all of these questions are just like triggering in my brain, and then I'm like, oh my goodness.
That's totally cool. It happens to me all day.
Yeah. When, did you realize that like the Red Dress Project was going to be so big?
I didn't. I just like it just took me like I honestly like feel like I don't know how to put it exactly. Like you know there's like currents in the ocean, like you know if you just like I feel like I stepped into like a current and then it just was like like it just like took me not in a bad way, but like just along like on something that already was there, and I didn't have any really control over it, but like that was okay, and or that is okay. And I don't know, I feel like I've learned a lot on that journey, and I didn't at all ever think, I don't know, I just did stuff as it came, sort of like it's just like, you know, you just take another one
Go with
you just see where it goes. Like I didn't in any way ever think it would get like giant like this.
Yeah.
I am not really.
I know.
Until it started happening, and then I was like, oh, okay.
Oh,
like
wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, like really, like it's still like absolutely shocking, actually.
Yeah. It's been around like 7 years that it's been.
No, like forever, like since 2009.
That's not 7 years ago.
No. Oh my God,
no, I'm just kidding.
Math. I'm just like, stop.
I know. I know.
I don't know, but I think it was a really long time ago.
I know. I get like that, like especially around like my nieces who I'm super close with, and but I'm like, you were just 4 yesterday. Where does time go?
I know. It's weird. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, so long, like such a long time been doing this work. So
yeah. Well, I'm gonna hop into another question from the audience.
Sure.
So, what is the most impactful part in the process of creating the REDress Project? And that was asked a few times from our audience.
Okay. Geez, that's a tough question. That's such a tough question. There's like, I don't know. I mean, I guess what we were just talking about was like just seeing, like when I shared out the invitation to like engage with red dresses, like for people to put them up or people to do, you know, their own kind of creative ideas with the symbol of the red dress. like that was just, it always like continues to be like amazing to see all the different ways that people are creative with the symbol of the red dress. And like yeah, it's just wild. Like there's people doing photography and people doing like installations and people doing like there's little red dress pins being made, but like there's a different kind of red dress pin across, like every nation makes a different, you know, like just like the art of all the different people and like their creativity and their way of like engaging with that is just like unbelievable. Like here at where they're looking for those women, which is like super heartbreaking to even talk about, but community came together and they brought like over 200 red dresses around the site where they have the sacred fire for those women. And then they also created, like, a bunch of women came together and they took pieces of a red dress and made like a 30-foot tall like red dress out of all these different sewn together red like pieces of red. And like I just like, I mean, as an artist, of course, I absolutely like love like seeing different ways people are creative, like in ways that like I probably wouldn't be. That's really cool, and that's made such a huge impact. And not just the creativity, but also just like the solidarity and the, you know, the people putting their heart into, you know, being allies around the fight for justice. So that's been pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I have you seen the Walking with Our Sisters project?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and like you see like red dresses in those vamps that that
Yeah.
people have needed, and you just see like all across like the symbol that it has become such a strong, meaningful, powerful symbol. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And and
incredible.
the other thing that's actually really wild too, is I think it was the Gathering of Nations that started this. A girl named Tia Wood. You've probably heard of her. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure this is what happened. Is she started a red dress jingle dance special at the Gathering of Nations. So I'm pretty sure she's the one who started it.
Yeah.
Um, so like you can look this up online actually, like video of this, and it's like about 300 women in red jingle dresses. And that's the first. This is like, it basically has created a new category at Powwow for MMIW. So like the red dress jingle dance is like something that came up because of this project too, which is like unbelievably beautiful because like the jingle dress, you know, the jingle dance is the healing dance. And it's like to heal our women and to see like 300 women in red jingle dresses dancing for each other, you know, like to support each other is like just wow, it's really amazing.
Amazing. I for like the audience, if you don't know, the Gathering of Nations is the largest powwow, and it takes place in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But I was trying to do a quick Google search if I could find if I could find who started it, but
You can definitely, like, if you put like red dress and then you put like Gathering of Nations, you probably can find, like, anyone could probably find it like online. There's a video of it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go to Gathering of Nations. It is like
yeah, I haven't.
it's
I haven't.
a bucket list, or just like definitely something I want to do. But we are gonna hop into the next question. But this is from Amelia A. If you were to change one thing about this project, or how this project came to be, and how it was received by the public, what would it be?
I think that like at this point, and probably I should have thought of this a long time too, is like sometimes I question the idea of the dress itself because like I first myself like don't really like wearing dresses. So and then just thinking of like the dress as a symbol of gender is like can be kind of like reductive, right? Like where it's just like, oh, a dress means a girl and a pants means a boy, like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of way. But like I think it's like symbolic and has such a like long history of like representing women that like it made sense to make that choice. But yeah, like, but sometimes I wish that like there was a way of representing, like, I think people have been making like ribbon pants, for example, like for ceremony instead of ribbon skirts for ceremony, so that, you know, if you're not like on the gender spectrum, like one or the other, then like you have some way of representing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think about that now and I'm like, oh, I kind of wish that like I would have somehow been able to like represent, or maybe in the future will, you know, two-spirit people or people who aren't like genders, you know, like one gender specifically.
Yeah.
And I think that's like obviously a conversation that's like become much more prominent in the last like, I don't know, 5 or 10 years sort of thing since I started this work. But it's, you know, like I feel like I've done a lot of this work with, you know, gender nonconforming like people, like throughout the course of doing this work. There's been like a lot of people from like the gender spectrum that have been part of creating this work, that, you know, kind of aren't really as represented by maybe a red dress. So I think that's something I think about sometimes, about like how I don't know how did that happen. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, do you know, like the universal washrooms now? It's like the little.
It's like a half and half.
Yeah, it's like a half and half.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure something will come up, and like I've seen people making like, yeah, and then also like the idea of men, right? Like, and I think that people, not the idea of men, but like, you know, men, like Indigenous men are also facing high rates of violence, and two-spirit people are facing extremely high rates of violence. So, you know, all of those things I think are really important, and so like maybe they should be included in this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I think it brings up just a lot of conversation pieces and hard conversations that can be brought up, and I think it provides an opening for to have those conversations. And
yeah, that's just it, right? And I think that like as far as like yeah, like usually how I explain it with men, because like people are like, well, how come you haven't included men? And I'm like, well, I mean, I think women are targeted for their gender more specifically than men are targeted for their gender. Like, I think Indigenous men are targeted because of race, but not necessarily because of gender. But Indigenous women are targeted because of race and gender. And the same with two-spirit people. They're targeted because of race and gender. So it's like a double whammy. It doesn't mean that men aren't experiencing violence, though. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. It's it is just a double whammy.
Just to put it some type of way.
Yeah, I know. I was like, is that appropriate? But I don't. And so I'm gonna hop into. I wonder if we have any in our comment section. I haven't been looking at that part, so I just want to make sure that we are able to go through that. So, what is your next big project that you are?
So I'm actually working on a book on the REDress Project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that will be published out with Highwater Press. That's a publisher here in Winnipeg. And yeah, so basically it's a compilation of essays from a bunch of really awesome women from all across the country who do work in this movement, and also some stories from myself, and lots of cool art will be in there too. So I've been working hard at that for like 2 years now, so it should be coming out next year, 2025. Yeah, and then I don't know, I'm doing lots of other stuff too.
I feel like when you do this work, you just have like your hand in everything, and there's so much going on, and like Turtle Island is so connected and just also so strong. So it's nice to just be able to like look forward for something, but also just like have all of your other stuff going on.
Totally. I absolutely. And I feel like as an artist too, it's like, or I don't know, just doing the work I do is just like kind of really all over the place. It's just
It must be a lot of brain switching. That's all.
It is. It's tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely tough to organize because I'm not very good at organizing. So, but I do like doing a whole bunch of different things. Like that's fun. I feel like that's fun because I don't get bored.
Yeah. Change it up a little.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but we're going to go into our final question, and it comes from Kalu UT from London, Ontario. What resources or direction do you point people in to who wish to learn more about this epidemic?
Right. Yeah. So there's the I don't know. I'm not like I should have stuff written down for this, but maybe you could like send some stuff or like provide like a list for some people too. But yeah, there's the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So that's something that's like it's massive. Like it's like this thick, like that book, like that all the research that's been done, all the stories of the families that have gone through this, you know, and just really getting a handle on what everyone's been going through. And you know, reading through that, you just kind of learn sort of like the systemic and like real like kind of issues that are happening from so many different levels that are like really creating a space of oppression and violence for Indigenous women and girls. And I think that like also like everyone watching, like I would really encourage you in whatever way that you can to leverage like any power that you have to have the calls to justice in the national inquiry actually implemented, because that is something that the national inquiry, you know, has met, just so you guys know, with families of missing murdered women across the country for 2 years to compile all this information, all these stories, and to come up with solutions, like solution-based, you know, calls to justice of like what different organizations and people can do to create change. And those exist in a list format. And literally like zero media has picked up on this. So it completely got buried. I am absolutely actually furious. And it's, you know, the pandemic happened since then. It's been almost, I think, 4 years, and zero things have been done about it. So there was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Oh, everybody like is doing good work on that. Like lots of people are trying to implement that and get it going. And this is just like a partner, like a, you know, like a twin bunch of, you know, calls to action that also need to start, you know, being, you know, pushed in our society. And it's really something that people have not picked up on yet. So I would really encourage you guys to like look through the inquiry, look through the calls to justice, like specific things that specific sectors can do to make change.
I also want to acknowledge that we have we have 2 lists of resources that people have access to on our website. So that is under so the Downey Wenjack Fund, so downeywenjack.ca. Then you hit resources, go to Legacy School resources, and then once you hit May, you will find May 5th and have all of those MMIW G2S Plus, I believe, resources there. And then also, if you scroll down a little further, we do have another section under important Indigenous educational resources, and there's a whole subsection with resources there as well for people to have access to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I just want to thank you, Jamie, and to all of those who tuned in today. You can head to downeywenjack.ca/DWF Live for a list of our upcoming sessions, including 2 very special Indigenous History Month DWF Lives we have coming up in June. So we'll see you there. Again, Jamie, thank you for such a powerful session, and I hope you have a good day.
Miigwech. Thanks so much, Sabrina. Bye, everybody.